Imagine waking up in Moscow to a new kind of alarm clock, one that doesn't ring, it whispers. A whisper from the steppe that bends around radar, skims the treetops, and arrives at your factory gate at precisely the worst possible moment. That's the story tonight. Ukraine has built a land-launched, 1,000-kilometer heavy warhead cruise missile, while most of Europe is still drawing up the brochure for its future land system. If you're following the war closely, you know what that means. If you're not, buckle in. This is the part where the battlefield gets longer, quieter, and far more dangerous. Since the full-scale invasion began, Ukraine hasn't just survived, it's innovated under fire. In the space of a few frantic war years, Kyiv's defense industry spun up not one, but 2 long-range cruise missiles. Across the rest of Europe, only one truly comparable cruise missile emerged, and it's a ship-launched weapon. Impressive, yes, but married to the sea. Ukraine's newest answer, the RK-360L, an extended-range modification of Neptune, steps onto land and brings a 1,000-kilometer punch with a roughly 260-kilogram warhead. In pure numbers, that puts it nose-to-nose with France's MdCN/NCM, whose warhead sits in the 250 to 300-kilogram class and reaches similar distances. The difference is that Ukraine can fire its missile from a truck in a muddy field. France, for now, needs a warship.
You've seen Neptune mentioned before as the anti-ship system that helped push Russia's Black Sea fleet off the pier. This is its long-range land attack cousin, the RK-360L, demonstrated publicly with performance that Kyiv's defense press brags is on par with or above the French naval missile. And while Western governments hedge about guidance details, Neptune's accuracy has already spoken in a dialect the Kremlin understands. Industrial plants hit deep inside Russia, including the Electro-Detal facility in Karachev. That's not a lab test. That's a production line forced to take an unscheduled vacation. Here's the practical edge. France's MdCN rides in A-70 silver vertical launch cells at sea. The RK-360L, by contrast, is fired from mobile transport launch containers on the ground. A launcher you can hide under camouflage netting, roll into a hedgerow, or reposition between salvos. France plans a land-based version, the LCM, but even MBDA doesn't expect it to be ready before 2028. In other words, Ukraine is already doing from land what much of Europe is still planning in PowerPoint. For once, bureaucratic lead time isn't measured in months, it's measured in cruise missile flight time. MdCN's cylindrical fuselage is old school. The Ukrainian body also lacks low observable shaping and carries an X-wing configuration that modestly increases radar visibility. But lethality is a chain, not just a shape. Route planning, terrain masking, low-altitude flight, and massed salvos combine to make defenders' lives miserable. Production numbers are murky. France is believed to have built roughly 200 million Chinese New Years, and Ukrainian sources insist Neptune's wartime production line is cheaper and quicker. Would you like your pizza in 30 minutes or less? Ukraine's trying to do that with missiles. And Neptune isn't alone. In parallel, Ukraine rolled out a simpler cruise missile called FP5 Flamingo, the kind of fast-to-field platform that trades elegance for speed. Open-source buzz has attached a sensational claimed range to it. Think continent-wide headlines with lots of zeros. But the crucial point is strategic elasticity, a menu of long-range options at different price points. Not one golden missile you're afraid to spend.
Kyiv has also demonstrated a new homegrown ballistic missile in combat, hitting a Russian command post nearly 300 kilometers away with a 400-kilogram warhead. That system is reportedly entering serial production, which matters because it lets planners mix trajectories, ballistic arcs to stress upper-tier defenses, cruise profiles to slip under radars and hug terrain. It's the classic saturation and segmentation playbook, 2 kinds of hard problems arriving simultaneously. So what does the RK-360L actually change for Ukraine? First, geography. 1,000 kilometers from anywhere in central Ukraine puts a shocking swath of Russian infrastructure inside the no-sleep zone. Air bases feeding long-range glide bomb sorties, bomber fields launching cruise missiles at Ukrainian cities, fuel depots, rail marshalling yards, missile integration plants, even the quiet machine shops that make the boring parts you can't fight without. The Kremlin has built a war on the assumption that depth equals safety. RK360L turns depth into merely distance, and distance is a solvable equation.
Second, timing. Long-range cruise missiles are patient weapons. They can be routed through gaps in radar coverage, synchronize with electronic deception, or arrive in waves that force defenders to spend their high-end interceptors on low-cost decoys, only to find the real strike package coasting in a minute later. When the launcher is a mobile truck rather than a frigate, you get ambush logic. Drive, shoot, scoot, and live to fire another day. Third, cost asymmetry. Even if an RK360L costs a tidy sum, the economics of precision attrition favors the attacker when targets are $1 million per day bottlenecks. Shutting down a single engine overhaul line or pulverizing a critical radar component supplier can ripple through Russia's force generation cycle for months. Add in a domestically built ballistic missile and a family of simpler cruise vehicles, and Ukraine suddenly has the toolkit to turn the Russian rear into a perpetual emergency response zone. And while Moscow can move assets, it can't move factories out of missile range without moving them out of Russia. Now flip the map and ask, what does this mean for Russia? The short answer is oxygen deprivation, strategic hypoxia. Russian air defense now has to defend everything, everywhere, all at once. That's not snark, it's math. When Ukraine could strike 100 to 300 kilometers, Russia protected the obvious. Bridges, HQs, a few SAM nests. At 1,000 kilometers, the list expands to hundreds of sites. Energy nodes powering production, rail choke points that feed the front, depots, assembly plants, radar farms, and the invisible assets, communications hubs, fiber backbones, and EW workshops. You run out of interceptors, then out of alert crews, then out of volleyball courts to convert into bunkers. Even perfect defenses are finite. Persistent offense is a drip, drip, drip that becomes a flood. There's also the naval angle. Neptune's roots are anti-ship, and anyone in a Russian admiral's uniform remembers the day a Kremlin flagship went from proud to plummet. Land attack variants complicate the rest of the theater. Whether or not Ukraine uses them against naval shore infrastructure on any given night, the mere existence of a road-mobile, long-range missile forces the Black Sea Fleet into a more defensive and dispersed posture. You don't sortie freely when a launcher could be hiding behind a copse 15 kilometers inland. Strategically, Europe is in an awkward mirror. The continent's only comparable cruise missile at this range class is France's MdCN, and it lives on ships. A land-launched equivalent, the LCM, is slated for around 2028. That's not a critique of French engineering. It's a reminder that Europe's land-based deep strike portfolio shrank after the Cold War, while the threat picture quietly grew teeth. It's also a wake-up call about industrial tempo. Ukraine, under bombardment, fielded land-based long-range cruise missiles faster than Europe could agree to build them. That should sting in the productive way. Why is land-based so important? Because land launchers scale. You don't need a carrier strike group to generate salvo size. You need disguised TELs, good roads, camo discipline, a resilient command network, and production lines that treat missiles like consumables rather than museum pieces. In a European war planning context, TELs mean deterrence without always deploying squadrons or task forces. And for Ukraine, TELs mean unpredictability. Today, a launcher in a tree line. Tonight, it's 90 kilometers away. Tomorrow, it's a phantom that Russia's drones keep not finding. Let's talk guidance and survivability without straying into classified weeds. Neither side is advertising sensor packages, but the effects are observable. Neptune-derived missiles are hitting point targets in dense rear areas. That implies robust route planning, waypoints, and terminal seekers capable of punching through clutter. Defenders can layer radars, but low-flying cruise missiles exploit the curvature of the Earth and local terrain. In plain language, sometimes the radar can't see you until you're almost at the door, and by then, you've already knocked. Here's a fourth-order effect people miss: labor. Russian factories working 3 shifts to refurbish tanks and assemble glide kits run on people, not just metal.
when workers spend nights in bomb shelters or days fixing roofs instead of machines, throughput falls. A missile that never hits a single soldier can still reduce Russia's daily launch count or slow the rail cadence feeding an offensive. War is logistics, and logistics is a heartbeat. Our K360L is designed to interrupt it.
Where does Flamingo fit? Think of it as the utility player. Lighter, simpler, potentially built in greater numbers, and ideal for saturating defenses or hitting less hardened targets that aren't worth spending a premium missile on. The exact numbers will be debated in forums and Telegram channels for months, but the strategic idea is clear. Diversify your arrows so you're not forced to shoot Excalibur at every fence post. And that ballistic missile, it gives Kyiv a different attack geometry. Even if Russian point defenses swat a few cruise missiles, a ballistic shot diving at high speed at a command node 300 kilometers away demands a different radar, different timing, different intercept windows. It splits attention. The more Russia must defend, the less it can attack. That's the quiet arithmetic of survival.
Okay, 3 quick reality checks. First, nothing is magic. Russia can adapt. Decoy factories, false targets, hardened roofs, mobile repair brigades.
They'll move critical gear east, scatter stockpiles, and shove S-300/400 batteries around like it's musical chairs at a very expensive party. But dispersion is a tax on efficiency. Every extra kilometer a fuel truck drives is a kilometer Ukraine doesn't have to defend. Second, industry wins wars. Ukraine's ability to serial produce these missiles matters as much as their range. It's not enough to showcase RK360L. You must be able to fire it on a Tuesday, again on a Thursday, and when the target set refreshes, twice on Sunday. French planners know this pain. MdCN is excellent, but expensive and inventory limited. The Ukrainians appear to be designing for wartime manufacturability because they have no choice. If conflict is a marathon, you start counting calories.
Third, escalation dynamics. Long-range strikes inside Russia raise political stakes. But Russia has spent years striking far beyond front lines. The difference now is reciprocity, measured, targeted, and precise. That signals to Moscow that the safe room at the back of the house is no longer safe. If deterrence is communication, RK360L translates fluent "do not." What does it mean tomorrow on the ground? Imagine a Ukrainian brigade planning an offensive. In the past, they worried about glide bombs and artillery raining down from beyond counter-battery range, launched from airfields never touched. Now, the airfield commander can't sleep. The glide bomb depot has a curfew enforced by cruise missiles, and the railhead moving armor toward the sector keeps not arriving. Pressure disappears from the front when you turn off the tap in the rear. What does it mean for Europe? 2 things. First, a blueprint. Land-based deep strike tells, distributed across the Union, tied into a common kill chain and fed by a joint industrial base, would radically harden Europe's deterrence. To paraphrase every procurement czar's nightmare, we found the urgent capability gap. It's time to accelerate the schedule we were already behind on. Second, humility. A country fighting for survival built what a continent could not field on land. Yet, if that doesn't shake up defense ministries from Lisbon to Helsinki, nothing will. And for Russia, welcome to the era of strategic whack-a-mole, where the moles move and the hammer learns. The Kremlin can keep pouring rubles into air defense and reconstituting plants farther from the border, but geography is not a force field anymore. When a truck-borne launcher can paint a 1,000-kilometer circle on a map and then vanish, distance stops being protection. It becomes the arena. To the viewer who wants a crisp scorecard, RK360L gives Ukraine reach, flexibility, and the ability to shape the enemy's depth at operational scale. It complicates Russian planning, thins out their air defense coverage, and bids fair to reduce sortie rates and munition output in the medium term. Flamingo and the new ballistic missile add density and alternative trajectories to saturate and confuse defenses. Taken together, they mark a pivot from enduring the storm to choosing where the storm lands. And yes, 3 light jokes before we close. 1. Europe's land cruise missile is due before 2028, which, in procurement terms, is practically tomorrow. So, congratulations on the speedrun, sincerely. 2. Calling a missile Flamingo is a power move. Nothing says we brought the party
like a bird that stands on one leg while ruining your entire logistics plan. 3. If the Russian air defense forces had a Fitbit, the step count they're about to log running between sectors would finally beat their propaganda. The war is not over, and missiles don't win it alone. Drones still chew at armor. Artillery still decides kilometers. Infantry still holds ground. But with RK-360L and company, Ukraine isn't just defending trenches. It's redrawing Russia's mental map of what's safe. Factories, depots, and airfields across 1,000 kilometers now have to live with the hum at the edge of hearing. The sound of a missile you won't see until the moment you do. The question for Moscow isn't, can we stop every shot? It's, how many missed nights can our war machine afford? For Kyiv, the question is different and more hopeful. If you can reach the enemy's heart, how quickly can you make his hands let go?